Ellie as well. Great, thank you. Ellie is here today helping us. It's the first time we've had extra tech support, so this is really great. And Ellie will be helping us with the timings and the breakouts and that sort of thing. Um, so I think we can go ahead and keep as if you're just still arriving. Please add your details into the chat, who you are, where you're coming from. It's lovely to know when we share the chat afterwards, who's in the room. So, as I said, I'm Maddie Longhurst, coordinator of the Urban Agriculture Consortium. Jeremy Isles here is my co-coordinator, and this is our 11th Policy Influencers Network group. And the theme of this one is really wider than our previous pings, and we're looking at future directions of urban agroecology is the theme. And I know that we have quite a diverse group of participants in all of you today, some from local authorities, but a whole range of different backgrounds. So that's really exciting to see and interesting to see uh, that it's attracted such a wide range of people. So we're going to highlight today some of the amazing projects that are going on, led by some of our connections, our associates within the Urban Agriculture Consortium. And we're going to be highlighting 6 of those. Obviously, there are more, there are always more, and there's such a brilliant kind of energy in this area of work at the moment, and so many ideas coming forward, not just in the UK, but around the world in this space. So this is a real distilled set of nuggets that we hope will inspire and inform you to be able to activate some of this in your own context and take it back to move things forward. I'm going to just pass, first of all, to Jeremy to introduce a bit more about UAC and where we've got to and the context that we're working in.
Great. Thanks, Maddie. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Still people arriving. We actually had 83 people signed up as of yesterday, which is amazing. And obviously not everyone's going to turn up, but it's still a very good representative grouping of colleagues, partners, some people we've never met before, some old friends as well. So welcome, everyone. Enjoy today. It's an opportunity for us to put some positivity into the world, some positivity and optimism in a week which is full of things to be quite fearful of. So let's enjoy ourselves as best we can and come out of it with something that we can all be broadly in favour of and that we'll take forward. So I'm going to try and be very brief. For those of you who don't know, the Urban Agriculture Consortium was sort of hatched out of long-term consultations between 2016 and 2019, which then coalesced into the consortium as it is with six key partners as our oversight group. We were funded by Esme Fairbairn and Plunkett and various other people up until last year, and more recently by Lund Foundation, Necessity, and other people farming the future. So thanks to all of them. We're a very lean organisation. Quite Maddie and myself basically coordinate it all from our homes in Bristol, both of us. But we've done some what we think are great things. We've set up Pathfinder networks with people in the north of England and in the Midlands, more recently in the west of England area around Bristol, Bath. We had a particular focus early on in Northern Ireland with some colleagues there from Social Farms and Gardens. We've done some great work on digital mapping, on working with LWA, Land Workers Alliance, on farmstarts, on the Greenbelt, which Maddie will talk about. And you'll also hear about landed community kitchens during today. We've also run the pings. This is one of them. And as Maddie said, this is like the 11th, but it's sort of broadening out into something slightly different because UAC itself is at a sort of cusp point. So what we think, we haven't been good at everything. Some things we started doing and haven't finished off very well. But what we think we've been good at, and you're the judge of that, is we've been amplifying and accelerating good ideas, like today. We're sort of catalyzing people to join together in regional networks where they want to, helping co-design, collaborate with each other, and creating this sort of quite trusting network. If you're new to it, we're all trusting each other, so please take that in good faith. We're trying to shift the conditions for how agroecology, urban agroecology and peri-urban may develop in the future. We've developed this distributed network, which is largely run online, which is great. We were sort of doing that really, but lockdown forced us to do it. And we like to think we're dynamic, flexible, and that we've established UAC as a trusted partner. So you can all vote on that later. No, you can't. That's just as it is. But as I say, this cusp is this ping is a sort of cusp in our evolution. So to be, quite truthful, we're at the end of a funding phase. Esme Fairburn were great, but they decided not to fund us in the future. And we're looking, where should we go next? Who are our partners? And resources permitting. There's a lot of widespread policy discussion going on. COP29 finishes tomorrow. We'll hold our breath on that. But overall, despite this week's various news stories, overall, we think that the general thrust of discussion is that people understand that climate change is real. They understand that the food system is broken and needs changing. We understand more and more that agroecology, however you define it, it's a holistic and integrated approach, as the United Nations might say, and that people are signed up to it and want change. And I think the FF, Food Farming Countryside Commission response this week to their own report on the true costs of bad food and the present political discussion about inheritance tax was, the system is broken. Don't blame one component of it. We need to fix the food system. Everything else is a symptom of that. Right. There are some strategic policy documents in place, and some of you will know this, some of you won't. So I'm just going to mention them and we'll put them in the chat. You can follow them up. The Milan Urban Food Policy Pact started about 2015. We're signed up to it. Various UK government, local authorities are signed up to it. Sustainable food places have been around for 10, 12 years, and they are coordinating this massive network of food partnerships around the UK, and that is set to grow. So we are fully in support of that. The Glasgow Declaration on Food and Climate Change was made in the run-up to COP26, which was 2021. I think that was the one that was delayed. And earlier this year, Food Farming Countryside Commission and others contributed to the Hope Farm Statement. So all those documents you can access outside of this meeting. But one that you may not have heard about is a European urban agriculture mandate that was launched this September in a conference in Brussels that none of us went to because we couldn't, it was sold out. So you look at those things later. That's the policy context within which we all work. And it's really important that we understand how those are all complementary with each other. Our survey that we did over the summer had 25 responses. I won't bother sharing that with you entirely because it's too detailed, but what came out of it is our partners, that's you, the people who contributed to that survey, want us all to work within an ethical framework. They want us to work with empathy and equity, and they want us to be bold and fearless in the way we present what we're doing. They want a culture change, not just in the food system, but in the way we care, collaborate, work with each other for co-benefits, that we be considerate, compassionate, and that we harness the emerging energy that's in this room and beyond this room. So that's how we're framing our discussion. Needless to say, everyone talked about food justice, food security, and all such food nutrition, nuances of all that. Everyone talked about access to land, which is very pertinent for new entrants into farming, and that's part of the discussion that needs to be, factored in to all the other discussions that are going on about land and inheritance. People wanted to talk about training, learning, and knowledge exchange, and also, very importantly, access to markets. So those are the sort of overview of where we're starting from today. What we want today to be is a sort of collective discussion about where we all go as a collective group. Maddie and myself will then be collating a sort of short report about this collective discussion, which we will then be discussing with you, and we will be discussing with various funders looking into 2025 to see what we can do together and how to really shape the future of urban agroecology. So UAC, if we're nothing else, we are listening. We'll discuss everything with our funding partners. We'll send out a draft consultation document. Enjoy today, see what we can all weave together. If you're starting your journey on this now, start small and spread outwards and create the synergy that we all need. And just be fearless and remain optimistic. That's me.
Mhm. Thanks, Jeremy. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and I'd just like to start. Ellie, if you could just share the slides and go to slide 6. I think I will start there. So thank you. Will that go? Can see it. There we go. I just wanted to also add an important part of this context is that there was Prue from the Right to Grow campaign hosted a brilliant webinar recently with Professor Tim Lang, who many of you will be familiar with, about his work with the National Preparedness Commission. It's not something that we've really heard anything about very much, or our local resilience forums and things like that. But he was talking about the polycrisis, the food polycrisis, and how, and I would really urge you all to watch the recording and look at his slides. But one particular thing that I wanted to pick out was how, when talking about resilience and talking about the systems that we create to manage the multiple forces at work in the system, is that we need to move very quickly from a centralized through a decentralized to a distributed system. And only in that way will we really be able to have resilience against the shocks and the various crises that are that we're in the foothills of at the moment. He really made the point that we are woefully unprepared, and things do move slowly, but we don't have the opportunity anymore to move slowly. And I'm really hoping that the presentations today will show glimpses of how that distributed kind of way of networking ideas together can work, and you'll be able to see how they are kind of interrelated. I'd like to say a bit about why we chose these 6 projects to highlight. If you could go to the next slide. Is there one in between? There we go. Oh, I go back. There we go, that one. So obviously there's a lot of different things we could have chosen to highlight, but we like to be always sort of seeing what's coming over the horizon, what's coming from the emerging future. And all of the projects that we're going to highlight on, we chose because they are normalizing in their way urban and peri-urban agroecology and food sovereignty systems, principles and practices. What is summed up in the permaculture sense as earth care, people care and fair shares. They are all bringing policy and practice together in tangible actions that have both short and long-term benefits. They are creating conditions and cultures needed for accelerating the changes we need. They are focused on shifting power and decision making to those marginalized by current systems. They are designing local and regional food economies based on care, equity, and resilience. They're focused on generating ripples, co-benefits, and synergies through collaborative design, and they are part of UAC's wider network. So they all have these things in common. We feel that these are such important pieces for how we work together in this space. Next slide, please. Oh, not that one. The one with the questions. So I'd like to invite you to write down these 3 questions and hold these in your mind as we go through the presentations. It will be these questions as well that we will ask you to take into the breakout rooms and answer together. And it's also these same 3 questions that we will have in the Mentimeter at the end when you feedback from the breakout rooms, and we'll ask you just to sort of brain dump what came out of those discussions against these three questions. So what is a key piece of learning you're taking from these presentations? What would you like to understand better or know more about? And what will you commit to taking back into your network or organisation or project? So if you just take a moment to write those down or take a photo of it or whatever you need to do, and bear those in mind as we go along. So coming to the speakers, they'll be in 3 sets of 2. So this first one is the first pair is around the theme food is personal and political. And we'll hear from Prue Elliott from Incredible Edible about the right to grow, followed by Chiara from the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience about agroecological urbanism and landed community kitchens. We'll then have a pause for a couple of minutes just for everyone to just write down any questions that come up, make a few notes. And then we'll move on to the second pair, which is Tom who's the CEO of the Community Land Trust Network, talking about land trusts for productive land and safeguarding productive land and livelihoods. And then I'll do a short slot about our project that we did to reimagine the Greenbelt. And those are under the theme of power and belonging. And the third pair, then we'll have another short pause. And the third pair around the theme livelihoods that sustain life. We'll hear from Lauren from Flourish Peterborough about the regional collaboration to create farmstarts. And then we'll finish off with B. Lawton from the Landworkers Alliance talking about the market garden renaissance using the food zones model. So they're short presentations. We've asked people to distill all these amazing pieces of work into nuggets to be digestible and to give you a sense of the spread of the work that is going on at the moment. So without further ado, I will hand over to Prue to start us off, looking at the right to grow.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Maddie. I'm just gonna share my screen. Hopefully, never quite know with these things. Okay, how's that looking? Great, okay. Now I've got the Zoom thing covering what I can see, so hold on. Okay, right. Yeah, so I'm Prue. I'm from Incredible Edible, and Incredible Edible was founded about 14 years ago. And I think what we're mostly well known for is for being instigators of propaganda gardening, guerrilla gardening. So having that focus on people at a kind of grassroots level, going out and planting up unloved land in urban spaces and turning that into food and nature gardens. And that really comes from a place of wanting to sort of say, like, hey, let's just get on and make the changes we want to see in the world, and do that with like really practical local steps, not waiting around for those with power to make change happen for us. And that's the kind of ethos and the work at our core. But I think alongside that, we also have this recognition that sometimes you do need those with power to step aside in order for the grassroots efforts to reach their full potential. So we launched the Right to Grow campaign in response to that, and in response to observed challenges that the public have around land access, and a sense of members of the public feeling they have to fight for access to land, even when that land is already publicly owned land. And the Right to Grow is about sort of resetting that relationship between citizen and state from a kind of a no first to a yes first position. And it is a yes position in some places, but it's often not. So we want to see people using public land in urban spaces to grow food, and really recognizing that citizens play a very crucial role in creating the change that we want to see, especially where local authorities have limited resources, which of course is everywhere. So, this is a real opportunity. And of course, as kind of Maddie mentioned, there's wide change needed in the food system in order for it to be sustainable. And Incredible Edibles' role and the role of the Right to Grow is quite a specific section of that. It's about community growing, and it's about urban contexts. And I like to think of it as a sort of dig for victory piece of the future sustainable food system puzzle. But of course, it has an impact to the wider food system as well, because once you start engaging citizens to learn about and be involved in urban growing, that really opens doors for a better understanding around the wider food system and more support for sustainable practices and all of that. So ultimately, the Right to Grow is really about playing a part in this future vision where cities are producing a lot of the food that they need within city limits, and where there are alternative systems for people to participate in food production that doesn't block those people without land or on low incomes from getting involved, because ultimately we are an agrarian species, and this feels like a really important part of what we do and what people should be able to be involved in. Can't get the next slide. Bear with. Right. So I think that there's a risk with the Right to Grow, that it can be viewed as being just about a few people doing a bit of gardening in an urban space. But it really is so much more than that. And there is really fantastic anecdotal evidence, but also a lot of really amazing scientific reports, which really demonstrate the co-benefits of urban gardens, from health to social cohesion to food security, climate adaptation, flood resilience, crime, like just there's so many different ways that it benefits. And that's great. But I also think that at its heart, it is really about this sort of practical and pretty straightforward way that we can start to redress a balance, which I've tried to demonstrate here, around a kind of top-down model for solutions to adapting our cities for a changing world. And it kind of seeks to say, like, there is another way that we can do this that doesn't wait for central government pardon me, for central governments to hand out pots of money to local authorities. And it just kind of says, like, we've got to get on with this. And I think that connects with what Maddie was saying about the sort of urgency that we need to be thinking about here. Because ultimately we know that local authorities have got loads of different goals and plans they want to achieve on a whole range of different issues, but they have less and less money and resources to do that and to achieve those. So we really need to collectively find other ways to adapt to the places that we live. And I think that these food growing projects, there's so much evidence that shows that they just slot in to so many other policy areas, and they provide so much additional benefit in such a wide range of ways. So it feels like a no-brainer to me to empower more of this work and to make that citizen citizen-led. So to touch on barriers, I think an issue that we face in conversations about the right to grow, and I think historically in a lot of areas around sustainable food, and many other areas, is that there can be too much focus on the small things that need ironing out at the expense of keeping this focus on the optimism and the vision and the potential of community food growing. And that's not to say that we don't need to solve all those small problems, but I think it can feel like we end up potentially with a minimum viable product that avoids problems rather than the best potential product with an acknowledgement that it's okay if there are problems, it's okay if there are things that don't work, because we can solve them and we can learn and we can adapt and we can do that along the way. And I think another challenge is around trust and perhaps a fear, because I think there's a real sense of scarcity of land in urban spaces, which is well founded, because we do see a lot of public assets being kind of sold off and land grab potentials and all that kind of thing. So that's a real challenge, but I think we need to also collectively overcome some of how that makes us feel, because I think the scarcity mindset in relation to land can also prevent that big picture imaginations of a better urban space and what that could deliver for us. And I think ultimately we know that what we have isn't working at the moment, but there's also a fear of adopting something else just in case it has problems. And I suppose that's a kind of human nature to be comfortable with the status quo, even if it doesn't work. And I think in all walks of life that needs to be challenged. So that's also part of this project, is to keep challenging the status quo and keep pulling us back to a really positive potential vision of what community food growing in urban spaces can really, really do for us. So in order to get to this point where we have right to grow policies that really work, or other urban food, community food growing policies that really are empowering that work, we need to look at this as a learning opportunity and as a learning project. And that's very much how Incredible Edible is viewing this. We want testing spaces, pilot projects. We want kind of towns and cities that are prepared to see what works and be flexible and try stuff out and adapt, and to exchange information and to collaborate and communicate about all of that as they go. And we're just starting a knowledge exchange project funded by Sheffield University, doing exactly this, looking at exchanging knowledge and views and ideas about the right to grow and community food growing in 4 northern cities, with the view to see how bringing people together and doing it collaboratively may imbue these projects with a sense of kind of curiosity and optimism rather than sort of fear and risk aversion and things like that. And I think if we can get to that point where cities across the UK have right to grow policies or other community food growing policies that work really well and that are supporting communities into growing, then that really is a key part of future-proofing our cities. And that was part of why Tim Lang came and spoke at that call that Maddie mentioned, is from his perspective, having really deep dived into food security, community food growing is going to be a really important part of that. And I know that there's a lot of people that do recognise and starting to recognise we are likely to have more interest and more need for urban food growing in future years, and that I think the right to grow is kind of a foundational building block and a way for local authorities to actually do that stepping to one side and to say, you know what, go for it, make it happen. Because I think the sooner that we can create these frameworks that support people back into food growing, I think the sooner that our urban spaces can kind of adapt and ready themselves for future threats, whether that's climate change or food security and all of those things. And we can start supporting all those different goals from all the different policies that local authorities have around health and crime and climate and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to cover. I know I'm short on time, so I've put my email on the screen there. So please get in touch if you are exploring a right to grow or want to explore it. And I'm also going to share a link in the chat where you can sign up to keep up to date on the Right to Grow campaign as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prue. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. I will pass straight on to Chiara. You can introduce yourself, Chiara, and then just go for it.
Thank you, Maddie. Let me first share my screen. Can you, oops, I need to just move this one. Yes, hello. Can you all see my screen? Can you hear me well? Great. So thank you, Maddie, and hello, everyone. So I'm Chiara Tornaghi. I work at the Center for Agroecology, Water and Resilience. And so I'm here today to talk about the agroecological urbanism vision, and within it, the landed community kitchen project that we have running. Same problem as Pro. Yes, okay. So this work has its roots in a number of years where I've been working around issues of politics of urban land, urban agriculture, sustainable food planning, urban regeneration. And the more I explored the world of urban farming and sustainable food plans, the more I realized that there was a big divide. On the one hand, the urban world and food policy communities, which were focused essentially on issues of consumption, waste, public procurement, with little engagement of farmers within food strategies, and a number of contradictions within policy domains, mostly due to the fact that policies were happening in silos. So, for example, we had a city with an incredible food strategy like the city of Ghent, that at the same time was systematically over 10 years selling public farmland. So how can you want to support local production when then you sell off what is the most important resource for this? And also an appeal, there is an interest for urban agriculture, but a lot of it is in terms of high-tech, soilless, without appreciating the importance of soil and soil preservation, not only for food, but for the whole ecosystem. And more broadly, very little engagement with the transformation that is needed in changing logics of urbanization. And on the other side, my work has identified that farmers' movements were very much focused on accessing land, often looking for urban land, around farm training, farm starts, access to market, but not necessarily addressing or engaging with the contestation of the way urbanization was marginalizing them, making their livelihood and very difficult. And at the same time, a realization that a lot of new farmers were urban-based or in urban fringes, and they were looking for different farming models that were not necessarily addressed within farmstarts. So as part of this work with a number of colleagues and various communities of practice across both Europe and Latin America, we have been working around the concept of agroecological urbanism. So this wants to be a very different way of urbanizing, and it realizes that we essentially are organizing our society and our mutual interdependencies through provision of services, through the organization of the urban environment. But we have been forgetting about the importance of farmers and their needs. So what if urbanization instead was redesigned around the needs of the soil carer? What if we were caring for farmers? What if we were organizing our society differently? So urban agroecology was then becoming an agroecological urbanism, a principle and a vision to bring together the world of urbanization and of agriculture and agroecology. So the vision for an agroecological urbanism is based around 8 building blocks and 3 essential value shifts. So we call building blocks what we think are 8 areas that need to re-articulate social relations. These can be entry points because any of them could be a good start. And what we have realized is that in countries like in Argentina, where this work has been there for over 30 years, many of these building blocks end up overlapping. So this is more like a typology rather than to be taken literally. All of them are underpinned by three value shifts, and we think that the first one should be the interruption of what we call logical substitution. So the idea that you can substitute anything with money, so you can just get rid of soils and lands for their exchange value for building on. And we think that the main shift should be to understand that our life is based on healthy soil and the preservation of this. The second value shifts is around the ecology of care, and really centering around more than human solidarities, understanding that we all depend on a mutual exchange with all forms of life. And the third one is working around building resourceful infrastructure for community to be able to self-organize. And so the building blocks are then 8, we think. We have been working with communities of practice. Happy to see Dee Woods here because she was also involved in the project at some point. And she's been inspiring a lot the work around land community kitchens. So just to give you a flavor of this, so you can explore them more in our web resource. The productive housing estate is a way to think. The main challenge that farmers have in urban and peri-urban context, which is how to access housing at an affordable price, given processes of gentrification and high rents. So in Latvia, there has been an attempt to look into how you can create a synergy between these two, both at policy level and within looking at how we develop certain areas. The Land and Market Access Incubator, there are excellent examples in Spain and Argentina. And in Spain, for example, we had a network of cities all have embraced the principle of agroecology, and they together have been funding a technical office with 2 people paid full time that were then providing a technical advice on how to support councils to design the right policies, but also how to support farmers in accessing existing resources and support that was available to them. Another example in Argentina, the municipality has been providing a collection of organic waste and finding ways to then channel this to farmers that needed support for soil fertility management. And they have also been developing a public seed bank and special way to access markets for new entrant farmers. The agroecological park, there are several examples in Spain, are ways to preserve land from speculation. And we look at Greenbelts as a great resource, as if we understand that agroecology is not mainstream farming, so it is compatible with ecological stewardship and biodiversity. It could be a great way to look into how that land could become productive under agroecological approaches. And finally, another example I want to mention here is the fragmented farmland. 68% of agricultural land that is lost in Europe is fragmented in urban fringes. So in Germany and in Belgium, there are initiatives that look into the kind of patchwork farm. So looking into how those little pockets can be put together to create commons and cooperative forms of production that enable also the circulation of waste. And I'm moving on. Yes, Ellie?
Just to say maybe another minute.
Yes. And the landed community kitchen, which is the one I want to conclude with, is the building block that is very dear to me, is the one I'm working mostly at the moment. I've been working in the past years. So the landed kitchen has been, comes from the realization in particular that during the pandemic, lots more creative ways of bringing good food to people have emerged. So here we have just been funded for over 2 years to bring together 8 regional coalitions of agroecological farmers and food sovereignty inspired kitchens, which are working on food insecurity. And the challenge is, how can they work together? How can we identify economic mechanisms to make sure that these places become places for resources for everyone. So the vision is to have a kitchen in every neighborhood. And so obviously what we think is we need more value shifts, but we also need resources. We need to have funders that are willing to fund the piloting of more envisioning and creative alternatives to the mainstream system that we see, and we need local authorities willing to support this. What if we had access to public farmland? What if a local authority was funding a farmer full-time to provide food for the kitchens? So there are so many different arrangements that could be make a massive difference in the possibility of experimenting these pathways. So I will just leave it here and happy to go deeper into this work later. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chiara. And all of these are like portals. These little presentations are like portals into whole deep worlds of work and thinking. So please do explore. I just want to give a pause for a minute for digestion, reflection, to write down against those questions that you had, any thoughts that are coming up, or just to sit and let that percolate for a moment. Thank you, Ellie. The questions are in the chat if you didn't capture them before. There might be things that you feel you want to, questions you want to raise, or ideas that you want to share in the breakout rooms after the presentations as well. So just make a note as you go along. Okay. We'll go next to Tom. I'll let you introduce yourself, Tom. And in this second pair, more focused around power and belonging themes, Tom is going to kick us off. Over to you.
Thanks, Maddie. I'll just share my screen. So I'm going to talk about community land trusts and access to land for both for food growing and also the livelihoods of the people who are growing and eating and the food and the relationship with nature and all the other considerations that come into thinking about what we do with land within communities. And this is one of our members in Yulgrave in Derbyshire. They've built some homes and got an orchard and been trying to develop an anaerobic digester and various other assets there. So my project in relation to this discussion is some work we've started doing with shared assets in which Farming the Future has supported over the last 6 months to try to look at the connection between, on the left, the community landowners within our network across the country, over 100 of which own land on which they have around 2,000 different sorts of assets, and several other 100 communities trying to bring forward community land trusts to acquire land to meet the needs of their communities. And then the work that Shared Assets has been doing with some others within the network that the UAC is part of around access to land for sustainable agriculture and nature restoration. To understand the extent to which community land trusts are already active in this space, what other sorts of approaches to land ownership are trying to address this issue? What's the relationship between those in the CLT model? And how can we try to understand some of those synergies? So we've been doing some of that work with some research, with some networking events over the last 6 months or so. My vision for this is easiest to explain if I actually go to some American CLTs. But first I'll just talk to you a bit about what the community land trust concept actually is. So it's often misconstrued or misunderstood as basically just being about housing, because housing is a major need in many communities, and it's one that many CLTs have sought to address. The community land trust concept is simply this. It was put into a statute with a statutory definition in 2008 to describe a community organisation that exists for a defined local area, that anybody within that area can join it and they democratically control that organisation. Its purpose is to buy land and then steward and seek the development of that land to meet the needs of the social, economic, and environmental needs of that community, and to hold that trust asset locked for the long-term well-being of the community. And CLTs do many, many different things with their land. This one pictures in Bishop's Castle in Shropshire near me, where they've got homes, they've got a retail unit on the high street. CLTs own productive land being used for farming, for food, for nature, for workspace, for all sorts of different things. The idea is to think about a particular community and what are those range of needs that they have, and how do you reconcile and meet those different needs through the way that land is used in their area. The community land trust concept comes from the United States, although it has its roots in many different inspirations around the world, including the Garden City movement in the UK. And Lopez CLT on an island off the coast of Washington State is a really nice way to think about it, because within that island, you have all the different needs being brought together by a community land trust. So they have provided and developed a range of different affordable housing across the island. They own the freehold of a number of farms, which then support community-supported agriculture, as well as individual farming families. They run internship programs. They've brought in other infrastructure, such as this mobile slaughter unit, in order to support the farming within that community. And through this variety of activity, they can sustain a productive livelihood for the community and improve their access to high quality food, jobs, housing, and so on. And underneath all of it sits the land. There's another example in the States, which I was lucky enough to visit last year in Boston, where in the 1980s, the city council responded to demands from the local community in this area called Dudley, which is just south of the city centre, to compulsorily purchase 30 acres of what was then sort of abandoned inner city land and put that into a community land trust. And in the ensuing decades, they have pursued what they describe as development without displacement to build homes, commercial properties, as well as an urban farm, community gardens, playground, other space, and to use the revenue they generate from this to fund community organising and community development work to ensure that those that would otherwise be most marginalised within their community are at the heart of their work and able to access these opportunities. And by bringing these different things together, rather than treating them as siloed different activities that one organisation is focused on provision of housing, another organisation is focused on farming, they can make those connections to ensure that people have space to grow, they have space to live in while they're growing, that the stuff they're growing can be used by businesses and households within their community. In the UK, what's holding us back from doing this in the same way are two main things. So the first theme is around movement building, and this is where the work we've been doing with shared assets has been focused for the moment, is unlike in Scotland, where there's a really much more of a cohesive movement around land reform and community ownership of land. In England and in Wales, it's much more disparate. There are many different sorts of organisations that take different forms, take different names and identities that aren't really formed as a movement in this space in the way that community land ownership for other purposes like housing really definitely is through our network. And they're often very single purpose. So there's you have organisations who set out to buy a piece of land thinking about how can we conserve this for nature, but they're not thinking about how could that land also be used to produce food for the community in a nature-friendly way. And at the same time, could there be opportunities to provide some new affordable homes or other infrastructure on that land that would also support those activities? So we're working to try to promote that more broad and cohesive vision of community land ownership to place food and farming and nature and housing and so on all together rather than being in these disparate activities. The other part of it is how do policymakers drive this forward? And a lot of the rhetoric around community rights and community ownership and so on in England is based upon giving communities what are basically quite weak and difficult to exercise rights that are, I think, a diversionary tactic from understanding the way that land markets and development decisions actually take place. And some of the best examples we've seen of community land trusts and community land ownership being promoted through public policy is really by writing this into the mainstream way that the system works. And we're interested then in how can you take that to integrate food into that. And so these different examples here do that to varying degrees. So just running through them very quickly. The top left is a community land trust in East Cambridgeshire, where the community will be the owner of a 500-home garden village being built with Bellway. It's a very standard sort of model of development in some respects, but community ownership of all of land as well as the affordable homes gives the community the access to that land and the ability to then in future make decisions. And maybe they would invite Incredible Ed along to come and do some kind of guerrilla gardening on the land they own because they would have permission to do it because they own it. Food hasn't been integrated into that, but that model could be integrated into the way that we do all large-scale housing development across the country, which would be putting tens of thousands of acres of land into community hands, being able to think about these sorts of things. In the middle is a smaller sort of rural example where a district council helped a CLT get going with providing the finance and the land to provide some new homes, and we've seen many of those examples. Again, we could be thinking about how can we put more productive landscapes into those. Top right is a co-housing community, so it's not a CLT, but it's very similar in Cambridgeshire, where residents co-designed the way that the scheme was developed and ended up with a different sort of typology of how you lay out the streets and the gardens to create opportunities for collective food growing as well as private gardens, and looking at ways that we can give citizens the opportunity to co-design housing developments could create lots more opportunities for urban agriculture and urban food growing. The bottom left is a inner city regeneration project in Mile End, where the community got ownership of the underlying freehold and some of the assets within this development was built by a national house builder and with Peabody Housing Association taking the social rent, but the Community Land Trust owns some of the other affordable housing, and there's a trust that owns the underlying freehold. And again, that you could think about how you could use those community models to bring in food. The bottom middle is one of two social housing estates in the north of Westminster that were transferred into community ownership in 1992, following a long campaign against their demolition. And in this picture, the building in yellow brick in the back is a new building that the Community Land Trust built a few years ago, along with refurbishing the block in front of it in white to retrofit it and put a third story of flats on top of it with solar panels. They do food growing activities there. They do a whole host of community activities. And because they own the land and their homes, they generate a surplus of around £150,000 a year, which they can reinvest into community activities. And so linking up ownership of revenue generating assets with these things could be really beneficial. And then the final one is a new development coming forward in Leeds, right in the city centre of Leeds, called the Climate Innovation District, where food and the use of space is being integrated into the way they think about sustainable development there. And again, there's a community land trust and community ownership aspects to that. So rather than just looking at how communities can scrabble around and try and get access to bits of land that no one else wants, policymakers could also be writing community agency and ownership into the way that the planning system, in this example, is directing development within their area and then creating opportunities for the kinds of things that we're talking about on this call. That's me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tom. I'm going to follow on from that. Communities are definitely wise stewards, and I'm going to follow that thread that Tom's started and talk about the Greenbelt project that I was involved with last year. I need to share my screen, or maybe you could Ellie, for me. You might need to refresh it because I've just maybe a couple of things that changed. Otherwise, I can. Great. Thank you. So yeah, continuing the theme of power and belonging. We did a project last year funded by something called Grounding Technologies that enabled us to, as UAC, to follow a kind of inquiry and do an experiment into what it would be like to bring communities and diverse voices together to reimagine what our greenbelts could be for. And these peri-urban fringe spaces around urban centres were originally designated in the 1940s from a very sort of social equity kind of impulse to give urban dwellers access to the open countryside easily, but also to prevent urban sprawl and to retain a sense of openness. And over time, this has sort of changed into a policy, albeit it's been a very successful planning policy in many ways, but it's also, in reality, it's applied very inconsistently, and often agroecological and small producers are kind of disadvantaged in the greenbelt through the existing policy, whereas actually these are the spaces where we can most imagine landscapes of market gardens feeding the communities that are concentrated in the urban areas, and there being much more of a rural-urban relationship, especially when it comes to food. And here is an image of the Bristol and Bath Greenbelt, where we focused our project, which we called Greenbelt 2.0, Rings of Resilience, Resistance and Renewal. And on the right there is the map that we made on the ground of the barn at Three Hes Farm, representing the Bristol and Bath Greenbelt, and played around with ideas around what it might look like if we reimagined it together. Next slide, please. So it was really inspired by that little red dot on the map there, which is Yew Tree Farm. It's in a site of nature conservation importance in Bristol's Greenbelt. Bristol doesn't have much greenbelt inside its boundary. Most of Bristol's peri-urban fringes are in its neighbouring authorities, which poses a significant challenge in itself, and why we need to look at the food system on the scale of the West of England or Avon bioregion. But this particular case, Yew Tree Farm is Bristol's last working family farm, and has lost already a significant part of its wildflower meadow to Red Row homes, and is also at threat from crematorium expansion by the city council into land that open land that the farm uses for its regenerative grazing of cattle. And there are public rights of way right through that land. So why is it that a gold award winning food city such as Bristol could jeopardize something that to many is as precious as this farm? And it's been a space of so much conflict and tension and difficulty that we really were inspired us to do this project and think about how do we need to do these conversations differently and enter into planning discussions from a very different, less adversarial position. Next slide. So some of you in this call will be living in or responsible for or touched in some way by some of England's Greenbelts, which covers 13% of the country, more than just a percentage more than urban areas, which is interesting. Next one. And so we see a lot of this about the Greenbelt as contentious spaces. If you just keep clicking through, and now we're talking about grey belt, and a lot of people are this sort of image is synonymous with our green belts, and we're not in any way yet looking at how do we reimagine regenerative settlements with food combined. Why aren't we seeing a lot more of these kind of things in the peri-urban spaces? Why are the conversations so contentious? And so we wanted to create a different kind of conversation that we had funding to prototype this one conversation and to capture it using creative technologies. So we brought a team together, and we brought a small group of quite diverse voices from urban and rural spaces together into the barn for a day at Three Hares Farm. And you'll see that that's a picture of three hares and some of the illustrated ideas that popped up during the course of the conversation. We looked at maps, and we really everyone told their stories about their relationship to the land and their ideas for reimagining. And we really felt that collective conversations in convivial spaces like this can produce these incredible workable visions and find common ground that can really underpin and inform policy that will really work in this and help kind of land this whole discussion about Greenbelt and what we should do with it in a really good place. So there's the map on the ground again, the beautiful Greenbelt view from Three Hares Farm, and the film crew. So I don't know if this will be able to play, but I just wanted to, if I could, give a little taster. Might need to. Is there sound?
It would be amazing to see it more diverse. At the moment, when I'm walking around the village, there is not anyone else of colour around. So it would be amazing to see that.
Often there aren't enough footpaths to really give us freedom in the landscape. Within that, I also see like little huts and little buildings that maybe have like communal tools and supplies and stuff to manage the land.
The buildings would need to be made of inherently sustainable materials.
And the farmers will be skilled not only in managing the land sustainably, but also they will be skilled in welcoming people of all ages, all backgrounds, and show them how food is produced.
I'd like to see this field housing another 20 families, and the UK imports 40% of its food. So if we have an awful lot more horticulture, small-scale pigs, small-scale poultry, and goats, we're producing a vast amount more food and have a vast amount of more jobs in the Greenbelt and have a vast amount of more like human life and community and vibes, basically.
If we have activity centres dotted around to bring the urbanites out into the country.
If within the centres there were places for rehabilitation, for healing, connecting back to nature.
Climate, ecological and spiritual emergency centres. Yeah, custodians for and invigorate a whole new culture of connection with land for young people.
We've got the young people we're training, supporting, that they'll be confident come out by themselves in a few years.
It's like, how do we incorporate that into the curriculum, especially to get children from out of inner city schools, so that that's where camps and training go on.
Let's design it consensually by the community, by the custodians of the greater good.
Held as community land trusts.
It's a social justice issue. And then I'd like to see a mass transit system that links around these kind of things.
Oh, well, it loops all around.
Right.
Okay. Wow.
The transport links also support the workers. There's lots of buses and those goods get transported back into the city.
What's stopping it? Who are we trying to please?
Frequent community-owned vehicles, there's going to be less of the private ownership culture of private cars.
A network of wildlife corridors filled with solutions to climate mitigation.
These vibrant belts of nature and biodiversity coming out like a mycelium network out from the centre all the way.
So there's just a taster, and thank you to Ben, who's also here, for being part of that conversation. So the proposal is to really work with local authorities to hold more conversations like this. You can go to the next slide. Oh, might need to click on it. Yeah, great. So you can see the full film, the making of film, the animation, and the ping that we did on this, specifically focusing on this Greenbelt topic on our website. Next slide. We had a lot of feedback that was really, really positive and enabled us to shape a sense of the policy implications of working and doing this collaborative visioning and collaborative decision making together. I've run out of time, but it was good to share that film. And just to click onto the next one, and I wish we can share these slides, that we have framed these sort of long-term outcomes from this kind of collaborative and creative policy making. And we hope that more local authorities and West of England, or those sort of city region authorities, can approach the challenge of the Greenbelt in this way, especially across the sort of more bioregional landscape scale. As also we're doing in this part of around Bristol and Bath in the Avon bioregion, and we're working with others there around a vision for the bioregion called We Are Avon. And that is also bringing to life a lot of these kind of principles that we've been talking about. So there's a lot more there that I could say, but I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to give Maddie a breather because she's just been talking about that fabulous project. By the way, you'll have noticed I was in that film. It was bloody cold that day. It was about a year ago. None of us were quite prepared for how chilly it was. So as we did a minute ago, let's just have a minute for reflection. And if you go back to the questions that were asked, Ellie, perhaps you could repost those if you've got a sec. And we'll just have a pause again. Okay, so what's next, Maddie?
Thanks, Jeremy. So we're coming into our last pair, and here we're talking about livelihoods that sustain life is the theme. And we'll go first of all to Lauren Kendrick, who is part of leads the Peterborough Food Partnership. And then following her will be Rebecca Lawton from the Landworkers Alliance. So over to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Maddie.
Also, just to say, if you go to the top right of your screen and go to view, you can switch between seeing all of the people in the gallery view to just the speaker beside the slides. if you wanted to. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm the founder of Flourish Peterborough, which is an organisation in Peterborough which helps others to flourish through the growth of food and community, health and ecosystems. And I'm also the chair of the Peterborough Food Partnership. And we received the Sustainable Food Places Bronze Award earlier this year. Next slide, please, Ellie. So for the last 18 months, I've been one part of the OAC's Midlands and East cluster. And we are 5 women. In the last 2 photos, you could see all of us as we gathered in person in Peterborough. And we actually got the opportunity to go and see the Mars exhibition in the cathedral. Next slide, please. So within this cluster, we had Laura from the Greater Lincolnshire Food Partnership. We had Sabina from the Sustainable Food Norwich and Bethan and Bex from FarmStart Nottinghamshire. So today I'm going to be outlining some of the benefits of this collective work and collaborating on a regional scale to set up FarmStarts. As individuals, we are all working in food from across our areas. We not only brought together a wealth of knowledge and expertise, we came together wanting to share this with each other, cultivating a connection of learning and exploring ways we can weave things together. We are well networked and active within the grassroots organising in our areas and research. We all had a passion for better food systems, nourishing food, fair, just food systems and stewardship of the land. Together, we explored what the key themes were coming out from the work within our areas and found that across our areas, there was a need for new routes for farmers, training around agroecological food production with training and opportunities. As well as in person, we met up online and we were introduced and explored the importance of sociocracy for meetings, giving us a foundation of respect and how to move forward. Maddie's guidance with this supported our growth within this area. And it meant that we were not just talking about social justice, we were actively practicing this through how we organised and developed. Through our discussions, we found that there was often a disconnect between the food that's grown in our areas and the communities that we're living in. And obesity had a high prevalence and was a major concern for our areas, as well as other diet-related ill health. Another big issue was access to locally grown food in all of our areas. Through our discussions and exploration, we collectively came up with a shared vision, where robust policy and frameworks foster innovation, collaboration drives success, regenerative and agroecological practices are as standard, and local economic resilience is achieved, and community engagement is strengthened, and equitable access is ensured for all aspiring growers and entrepreneurs, and that would support our local communities. We can all agree that access to healthy food is essential for our physical and mental well-being. It's not that simple, though, within our current food system. Difficulty accessing healthy food isn't a new phenomenon, but with the post-COVID landscape in the food system, as well as the soil degradation and varying farm practices, we know that one carrot is not the same as them all. There is also a dire situation in the fens that is exacerbated by climate change, and that's an area that provides a third of the homegrown fruit and veg in the UK. Food stability across the country is potentially in question. As a country, we rely heavily on imports, with 40% of food overall being imported, and 43% of vegetables and 85% of fruit all being imported, generally from countries with water scarcity, flooding, and wildfires. 90% of our food supply is being controlled by 9 supermarkets, and our farmers are often getting less than 1% of the profit. And the money that's made is then coming out of our communities and going to their shareholders. But another way is possible, and FarmStart is part of the solution, which locally and nationally need to be adopted and fostered to enable resilience, support our economies, and improve the health of our residents. Next slide, please. In July, we hosted our ping, where we explore FarmStarts for the future, collating all the information that we've explored together. So what is a FarmStart, and how can this support our areas and wider? Farmstart is a concept that can be tailored to suit the needs of the local people and communities that surround it. In North America, they've been running for over 30 years. Next slide, please. So here are some of the key parts. Now, why are these so important? So farming isn't the good life or the game Farmville. It's hard work, and making a business from it is beyond that of allotment growing or community garden, although they can still be part of the journey to create professional growers. In the 2024 government figures shows that 60% of all new businesses fail in the first 5 years. So by offering business support, training, mentorship, viable routes to market, we're able to offer a space for entrepreneurs to test whether this is something they want to do and to support our economies. Across the country, there has been success in market gardens, cooperative vineyards, flowers, lavender for essential oils, and showing that this is not only for food production, but crops on the land using regenerative agroecological practices that respect the land, each other, and improve biodiversity, as well as providing a viable, sustainable income stream for those who work in this way. Farmers on average in this country may expect to see a £500 per acre return, but a fantastic example at Eves Hill Veg Co have made £35,000 in their first year on a new 1 acre site. They're selling their vegetables and fruit to households, local businesses like restaurants and bakeries. So how does our regional collaboration work? So we really found that there was the importance of information sharing, resource sharing across boundaries, and the connections that we were able to create. We were able to learn from experience what was working in an area, what wasn't, and paving the way for new sustainable futures rooted in agroecological healthy food for all. Next slide, please. One of the opportunities here you can see in the talc map of trainers in the UK, there's a massive gap and potential across the whole of our cluster area. As a group, we had a discussion as well of other potential projects, such as a mobile flour mill, which has seen some success in the north of England, as well as apple presses and mobile equipment like that. We're able to also look at the issue through different lenses and see how the threads can join up to create the full picture. But as to truly be able to understand the nuances of our areas, we need to have feasibility studies for these individual areas, offering in-depth information, knowledge of an area and the potential that it has, as well as how this data can then be looked across regionally and see where there's gaps and opportunities backed by research data. Nottinghamshire Public Health innovatively funded a feasibility study for their area. I think that Kathy is on the call and will be able to answer questions about that feasibility study later on in the discussion groups. But with the current situation, not all of our public health may be in a position to now fund feasibility studies of this kind, but they are an essential partner. There are clear health benefits for healthy eating in reducing diet-related ill health, and the benefits to mental health with our communities by getting people outside into nature and understanding where their food comes from. Public health, as well as many directorates in the council, are important partners within the development of this. In Peterborough, we've hosted one of the meetings with our public health team, with our economy and environment. That was back in March of this year, and we're just currently waiting for a confirmation of a second meeting to move this forward. Next slide, please. So what next? I think if we can get feasibility studies in all of the areas to really focus on collaborative working over silos. So for the better collection of the impacts of what these farm starts are having, as well as ongoing data collection and sharing, and to support our new entrant farmers. Next slide, please. So how can you help? So you could talk to your Sustainable Food Partnership about moving forward with this, working in your areas. Think about if there's any land available. think about if you know of any funding that can support this work, as well as talking to UAC about a cluster in your area. If you're not part of the Midlands and East, or if you are, come and talk to UAC about joining us within that. And also to consider the fact that we cannot eat healthily if we cannot access good food. Next slide, please. So thank you very much. That's my kind of very whistle-stop tour of what we've been doing for nearly 2 years. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Lauren. It's been a brilliant experience to work with all of those great women. Another who is on the call as well, Sabina, is here. Yeah, and see how much people can become more than the sum of their parts. It's great to support that. So finally, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca Lawton to talk about their work on the market garden renaissance. Following that, we'll have another pause, and then we'll go into the second part of today, into the discussion section. So over to you, B. Thanks.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'll just take a moment to share my screen. So okay. Is everyone seeing that? Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I feel like I've got the plum position here going last because there have just been so many amazing presentations, but mine actually just does draw together quite a few of these different threads. And actually the vision that I'm going to share with you really wouldn't be possible without all the elements that the previous speakers have talked about. So I'm Rebecca, or B. Lawton, and I work for Landworkers Alliance as their horticulture campaigns coordinator. And I'm going to talk to you about a market garden renaissance, which is the term that we're using for the vision that we want to achieve over the next few years, and that we relaunched in January this year under the label of Horticulture Across 4 Nations. So as Lauren alluded to, about needing to decentralize veg production, we're looking, well, I'll come on to that in a minute. Our vision involves diverting 20% of the 2.7 billion that the UK currently spends on vegetable imports into local and agroecological or organic produce. And our vision would entail every city obtaining 60% of its produce from urban, peri-urban and rural hinterland farms within 50 to 100 miles of the city, as well as creating a dense rural network of growers, CSAs, food hubs. And to achieve this would entail a massive increase in the number of market gardens and vegetable farms across the UK. And also a massive increase in the way that these vegetables could be sold to people. And part of our vision involves every primary school child having 2 portions of local organic veg with every school meal they have, every lunch. And also having what we term farmer-focused routes to market in every city and town. So these are ways of marketing. They might be box schemes, they might be food hubs, but have both values at their centre. So ensuring that the farmer gets paid a decent proportion of what is paid for the food, that the food is produced in a sustainable way, and that worker welfare at every stage of the journey from farm to fork is really upheld. And if we were to achieve that vision, this would keep 5.9 million pounds circulating in UK local economies, rather than being spent on imported vegetables, as is happening at the moment. So I'm just going to share with you briefly this diagram of the food zone system, which was devised over 20 years ago by Growing Communities, which is a vegetable box scheme in Hackney in northeast London. And the proportions in the food zones model are based on what they're actually managing to achieve. And they supply about 3,000 boxes to people in northeast London. And 60% of what goes into their boxes comes from the urban areas, the peri-urban areas, and the rural hinterland. So of that, yes, a smaller amount is coming from the urban and the peri-urban areas and a larger amount from the rural hinterland. But it's also pragmatic because about 20% of the food is coming from the rest of the UK bought via wholesalers. And then about 15% is imported from the rest of Europe and 5% from further afield. So it means you don't have to give up bananas if you really don't want to. I'd really encourage you to go to the food zone, to the Growing Communities website, where you can find out much more about food zones. So why do we need such a vision? Lauren's actually spoken through some of these issues already, so I'll skip over the imports and the fact that we're reliant on water scarcity. But one point that I'd really like to stress is that UK growers themselves are struggling to stay viable due to supermarket pricing. The prices that large growers get barely covers the cost of production, and a lot of growers are actually fearing that they might go out of business. Last year, the Riverford Get Fair About Farming campaign did a survey which said that about 49% of growers were fearful that they might go out of business in the last year. And I don't know whether how many of those have actually gone out of business, but we're in a very perilous situation where the risk of imports increasing is very great at a time when we really need to be increasing what we produce in the UK. On top of this, at the moment, 77% of adults eat less than the Eat Well recommendation of 5 to 7 portions of fruit and veg a day, and diet-related disease is costing the NHS billions. And Jeremy alluded at the beginning to the Food Farming and Countryside Commission report, The False Economy of Big Food, which has come up with the figure that the total costs of ill health, including direct costs such as healthcare, social care, and welfare, are costing 268 billion, as well, and that it also includes indirect costs and human and productivity costs. So this, and actually the cost of a healthy diet, which would still cost more than what is being spent on food by people nationally, but it's still significantly less than what it's costing the government to keep going with treating an economic productivity lost from ill health. So there's actually a really strong financial case for investing in the market garden renaissance. I'd really, really strongly recommend reading that report. I'll post a link to it in the chat in a minute. So what co-benefits would your vision unlock? Well, for a start, more people would have access to vegetables, and they'd actually eat more vegetables. The Growing Communities Impact Report found that 85% of their customers for their veg box scheme were eating 5 to 10 portions of vegetables per day, which is really bucking the trend for compared to the average consumption of vegetables. And so, as I mentioned before, this could really significantly decrease diet-related health costs. It would also create a more resilient supply of fresh produce. And I was really struck by the diagram that Tim Lang brought in about the decentralization, moving towards the network. So that's moving beyond this decentralization towards yes, a real network of different food producers connecting with each other. It would also be a carbon negative production system because Lauren alluded to the fact that a third of vegetables are currently being produced in East Anglia in the East Midlands. And one of the really significant impacts of that is the vast amounts of greenhouse gases that are being given off by cultivation of peat. I mean, I've been told figures anecdotally of 26 to 32 tons per hectare per year of greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide equivalents being given off. So in comparison, agroecological and organic market gardens can actually be carbon negative, and various case studies shown by the Farm Carbon Toolkit created by the Farm Carbon Calculator show that small scale farms are actually sequestering more carbon than they're emitting. And I really am keen to see more market gardens using the Farm Carbon Calculator to demonstrate these benefits, because I think that makes a really powerful case for market gardens. They also, the vision would unlock decently paid, fulfilling horticultural jobs. At the moment, this is quite a struggle. It's an aspiration rather than what's being achieved because of, well, I'll come on to that in a minute, actually. But another benefit would be that people would be better connected with their farms, the general public, through buying directly from farmers, from getting newsletters, social media posts from farmers, but actually getting onto farms, either just to collect their veg or farm walks, farm visits, open days, events on farms. And that would enable people to understand issues like seasonality so that they adapt their diet towards what's in season. So at the moment, that vision is very much a vision, and it's going to entail all the people working on these different elements working together, as well as strong government leadership to achieve this. In the FFCC report, I was really struck by one quote, which is that the squeezing of households and farmers at each end of the supply chain is one of the most difficult dynamics standing in the way of change. And I think it's really important not to diminish that. We've got these visions, and I think they could really be powerful, but we really need government, that's national government and local government, to be working with us to achieve this. It can't just be achieved by grassroots. Okay, I'll be there in a minute. So growers at all scales struggle to be profitable because supermarkets are pushing down the value of food, and that impacts local growers as well as national growers because of the direct competition. There's also a lack of skilled new entrants attracted into farming due to the low wages and poor training opportunities, but that really can be addressed if we can get the rest of it working well. The cost of startup is prohibitive for new entrants, access to land, etc., as well as the regulatory barriers, in particular planning permission for agricultural workers' dwellings. And that would, if more agricultural workers could actually live on site in low impact and sustainable dwellings, that would really make a difference to how viable these market gardens could be. So what do you need to take this forward? We need reliable, reasonably paid markets, and we need better training opportunities, including paid training opportunities. We need the environmental land management scheme to be delivering for market gardens as well as larger farms, to reward them for the public goods that they deliver. As a matter of course, it's not that they're not delivering them already, but they're not getting paid for them, whereas ELMS is a way that they could actually be paid for these. We need council farms and facilities for peri-urban food production to be made available at subsidised rates to really kickstart this movement. And we need planning policy that prioritises agroecological land use, including both the infrastructure necessary for viable businesses and also dwellings. And I will leave it there. And thank you very much for listening, and look at the Land Workers Alliance website if you want to find out more about this, particularly the publications, because there's lots and lots to find there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bea. There's a lot to digest there, and we're going to just take a moment again to reflect against those questions. Notice any new questions that are bubbling up, any thoughts that have been sparked, that any connections that are being made in your minds between the things that you've heard, and the things that you're doing in your own context, in the relationships that you have with the people that you're working with, and what is emerging in that space between where the government operates and where the markets operate, and this sort of this powerful space that we might call the commons, how people work together to create change. In a moment, we will transition into a small group talking space, and after that, there'll also be some time, if people can, we'll ask people to feedback from the small group discussions in the breakout rooms for a few minutes into a Mentimeter, and then we'll also have time for some more question and answers if people still have things that they want to share. You can also hold on to any of your questions and direct them at any of us after this session as well, of course. But often some of the most fruitful spaces are when you have these kind of inspired discussions in small groups. So we're really looking forward to that. Ellie, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to put you into groups of about 4 or 5. And those same 3 questions are the questions we'd like you to have a conversation about. So I think you'll have, am I right in saying 15 to 20 minutes?
Yeah, 20, I think.
And
yeah, we'll see how it goes.
We'll give you a warning when we're going to drag you back in from hopefully some great conversations. But you'll have 4 or 5 people in a room, the same 3 questions, and just I guess time yourselves accordingly. If you want to focus on one question at a time and hear from everyone on one question, feel free to do it that way. If you want to go round and everyone answer each question individually, that's also fine. Make sure you are able to hear from everyone, and we'd love you to capture or to make notes as you're going about those questions and your answers, and we will post a link where we'd love you to share your questions and to share some of those answers to your questions from that conversation, and that's so that we can sort of gather and harness some of the richness that if we're not in the breakout rooms we don't get to hear. So Maddie, Jeremy, is there anything else you'd like to add? Brilliant. I'm going to open the rooms and wish you really great conversations.
Can you broadcast the questions into the breakout rooms? Or I don't know if you... Anyway.
I'm also going to pause the recording.
There we go.
All right. I hope you had lovely conversations and met people you hadn't met before. and connected and shared stories and questions and inquiries, and picked up some threads that you want to take forward. We just want to, while that's all alive in our minds, we just want to capture some of the key things that came out of those discussions. So we're going to use a Mentimeter. There'll be a link that you just click on. It will come in the chat. You click on it. It will take you to another web. It will open another web page where the questions will appear, and you'll be able to type in a little box in response to that question. So it should be straightforward. Sometimes it doesn't work, and don't worry if it's too faffy. You can put things in the chat as well. But Menti works really well because it collates everything instantaneously. So it's really good in terms of using our time well, and also having a document. So part of it is that we're going to draw together everything that we've talked about today, and the presentations and some of the other work that's connected into this, and put it together into kind of report about future directions of urban agroecology that will be then shareable. And there's this sense that the movement is on this cusp of maturation. We used the word pregnant in the group about this sort of sense of becoming and possibility and energy that is and needs resourcing, as well as human resource and love and passion and relationships. There's other kinds of resourcing that need to draw into all this work to take it to the next level. So that said, I think there's a link. Ellie, do you want to? Yeah, and we ask that we'd love to be able to know who's saying what. It's really helpful for us, just to know where the different thoughts and perspectives are coming from. So if you're happy to, please just put in your name or your initials at the beginning or at the end of each response that you type in, just so that we know who it's come from. It might also be a question that we want answering, because I'm sure that lots of questions have come up. Is everyone managing to open the Menti? Yeah, cool. Any props?
Responses on, I can share my screen at some point and people can see them as they're going around.
I've already posted the first question without putting my name, signing it. Can I go back?
I'm not sure, but don't worry if there's a nameless one, maybe, or maybe put it in the chat and let us know which in the chat in the Zoom, and you can let us know that way. Thank you.
Do you want to share your screen, Okay, if there's or in a bit.
Yeah. Didn't want to distract from
No.
answers being written down. Oh, this is the live version of what's going on. You can see responses pouring in.
Love the idea of political pedagogies. It's one there, Chiara.
Yeah, I would have loved to talk more about it. There was no time, but next time I'll get in touch.
Next time. Yeah.
I actually had a slide that I skipped, but
Mainly that there are more people interested and passionate about food sustainability than I realised. That's a lovely comment. I'd like to talk to each presenter about the specific economic model cases that they are working with in order to surface this priceless knowledge. How could community landowners invite, please go down a bit more? Oh, up a bit, sorry. How could community landowners invite some of these approaches in if they have land and want to explore leases/agreements with innovative agroecological organisations? Thank you all for putting your initials and names in. Interested in looking at the tenets of sociocracy? Challenges with current legislation and the desire to change it for the better.
See if there's any commitments yet. Yeah.
The wisdom of the crowd is so powerful. Yes. An aim to clear some space for more strategic work. Yes. That came up in our conversation as well about how easy it is, particularly in a local authority setting, to get kind of drawn into the more administrative side of the world, and the need to kind of pull back and look up and around, and that's really what these pings are for, to ignite some sparks and make some connections. And also anybody who wants to email to get in touch with anybody else that you've encountered today, any of the projects or any of the people in your breakout rooms, I can connect you. So if you don't know my email, I'll put it in the chat.
Just on that, Maddie, we have all your email addresses because you booked in. Obviously, we can share those with your permission because of the what's it called? GDPR thing. We are registered GDPR with the Office of whatever it's called, information. So, can we assume that we can share your emails unless you decide that otherwise? Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll take that as read then. Thank you.
So just in the last moment, it'd be lovely to just hear into the, any final reflections, questions, or in the spirit of a kind of closing round, if you like, although we don't have to go round everybody, but just jump in, and any reflections you want to share on what you've heard and how you're leaving the session today.
I just wanted to share that this is such a rich web of networks and connections, and you started off talking about how the current dominant food system is centralized, and this is just a great example of the decentralization, and it can be quite bemusing sometimes, like who's doing what, but it's also part of what is required for a rich, diverse food system. So it's just great to see this is happening already in its little way.
Thanks, Rachel. It's really nice to see you. Thank you for coming. Who else would like to share something in the closing? Joe?
I can jump in with a thought. I feel sessions like this make it really clear that we have the answers and we have solutions and we have lots of evidence to back all that up, and it feels like the next stage is about helping other people to feel brave and to kind of come with us on this journey. Yeah.
Sorry, Maddie, I didn't know if there was another Joe or if it was me that you were picking on, but that's absolutely fine. And I would echo what Prue has said. I mean, yeah, there are incredible examples of amazing work that's inspirational, and to try and, how can we try and gather those together in more of and just get more people to gravitate and stick to that kind of, and find that critical mass that really starts to drive a movement. And as I've said in the men's meeting, it's very inspirational hearing all these fantastic examples of work. How do people do that? And arming people with examples of, this is who I spoke to, and these are the things that influence them, and these are the people you want to kind of gather around, and a bit more of I hate the word toolkit, but something along those kinds, a guide of how they actually did it. And, getting those champions, those people within those local authorities that have actually made the decision, because they're very, very busy. And so trying to get them to meeting upon meeting upon meeting, whether it's online, is going to be tough. Can't they be recorded? Can't they be just kind of talking about what they're sort of doing? And that is a part of that toolkit. So other people, their counterparts in other local authorities, can listen to them, and they can see them, and they can go, aha, yes, that's how we kind of do it. It's talking their language. So that's what I'm kind of taking away. And as a general kind of ask, can we kind of do that? Because it's fantastic, and it's how it should be going. We just need more. We need more of it.
Thank you, Joe. I go to B and then Sabina.
Yes, I was inspired by what Prue was saying about the web, because that really came out of this session to me, that we have moved to a web, and this movement already is at that resilient level that Tim Lang was talking about. And it just made me think about a really inspiring diagram I saw earlier in the year that Anna Taylor from the Food Foundation used in a presentation, which is called the Bacana two-loop model. And it's a sort of graph, and it has the dominant system coming over in a curve over the top, but sort of going down in the curve and senescence. And then it has the grassroots project coming in an upwards curve. And I'd really recommend you Google it and have a look, because it does really feel like that's what is happening. But I think we also really need to convey that to people in government, in local and national government, because I don't think they really realise quite what's going on here, and that there is this enormous resource, energetic support resource that they can draw on. So I'd really encourage people to convey the excitement we felt here to people in power that they have connection with at whatever level.
Thank you for that. And thanks, Ellie, for putting it in the chat.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Ellie. That's amazing.
Sabina.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to express gratitude really for something that the Urban Agriculture Consortium keeps doing, which is not just looking at a very practical level at how we can change the world, but also to really be focusing on and developing a new consciousness to underpin the work that we do. Because, you know, as we all know that we can't solve the problems from the consciousness level that the problems were created from. So there's always this level of deep inner work, particularly that I've experienced Maddie bringing into the space with sociocracy and what have you. And so just really want to express my gratitude for that and acknowledge that I see really deep power coming through from that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. Susan.
Sorry, coming off mute. So I was inspired by in another chat in our breakout to be brave. And I wanted to offer in the post communications that we might do that if anyone who has actually done something that they feel has been successful in growing and connecting their communities with growers and with local food, that they can contact me, because I'm going to try to raise some money to create an online resource of economic models, which I desperately would love to use in my own locality, but can't find anywhere. So when we talk about this worked really well in a community land trust, or this worked really well when we connected this community to their local food, economically, the economic model behind that is really critical, right? Where did the funding come from? What did we pay for? What did we get donated? And is that a sustainable thing that we can keep doing? Is really material knowledge. And in every forum I'm in that's related to food systems, everyone asks the question. So if you do have such a thing and you're willing to even verbalize it to me so I can write it down, or if you have documents that you're willing to share, my email address will be, I'm Susan Arndt, and I'll be in the set of emails that's shared. So if you feel that you're able to share a model with me, I would be very grateful.
That's a brilliant offer. Thank you, Susan. Maybe if you want to just email us like a paragraph of that invitation, sort of articulated what you'd like people to share with you. We'll share them. Yeah. Are you based anywhere in particular? Is it, or are you coming from a particular location or organization or?
So I am an individual citizen. I live in Brent. I have recently freed up 40% of my time to work on community growing. For now, I can do that for free. I can't do that for free forever. And I'm trying to put together a collaborative model across the community organizations that we have locally that are connected to growing and feeding children in schools, or growing food, and work with the council if I can, if the council will let me work with them. So I'm trying to create something that doesn't currently exist by creating a model that these organizations can participate in, and therefore I'm looking for, samples to replicate or to learn from as we do that. And so anyone who is in this space, either geographically or has done that in their own community, we're very peri-urban, right? So we're urban, and we don't really we have farms within 100 miles, but we don't have farms that are close to us. And, we're doing a lot of, I work in an organization that does a ton of fruit gleaning every autumn. It's a considerable amount of food, but it's food bank donated. So how do we connect the community into their growing opportunity, into their own food agency, right? Because I think the agency over my own food is what changes this thing. It's what changes the proportion of population that participates. And so I think finding a way of unlocking that economically, I think is really important. And I also think with my other hat on that, relying on volunteers to change the food system is not sustainable. And you'll never get the broader population involved in it. And so I'm trying to find a way of doing that.
I think you'd be interested as well in the landed community kitchens project that
exactly
the message.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, which is about prototyping models for those coalitions between the sort of social justice orientated kitchens and agroecological growers, and trying to experiment and test and prototype sort of models that have an economic strength to them, that the value kind of generated between them sort of is sustaining, builds resilience and capacity.
There are lots of models, and unfortunately I had another meeting, so I missed the first half hour. So I came in the middle of Chiara's presentation, so I'm gonna have to watch back everything else. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Thank you for that. In the last few minutes, is there anyone else who would like to chip in at this point? And before I pass to Jeremy to round it off, I think. Thank you so much, everybody, for staying with us and sharing all your experiences and wisdom, and lovely to see loads of new faces and loads of familiar faces as well in the room for this 11th ping. And there's this really real sense of the need to build it and they will come as well. And the question around how we resource that. Yeah, so much good energy, imagination, passion, knowledge, skill in this space that is ready to really head into a next chapter against all the odds. Jeremy, I'll pass to you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, everybody. Amazing. I didn't think we'd get through 2.5 hours, but I think we could go on talking for another 2.5 hours and we still wouldn't get there. And I haven't said hello to loads of people in the room I know. So hello, all of you. And I can see you smiling, Dee. So hi. I'd also just shout out, there's 4 people from the National Allotment Society on this call. So welcome you, all of you. I hope you've been listening carefully. You'll notice that allotments were only mentioned once. That's not because we don't like them. I'm an allotmenteer myself. I've had one for nearly 30 years. But we wanted you in the room particularly so you can hear this discussion, and we would welcome a further discussion with you, because allotments are a fundamental part of what we're talking about and the first step that many people take into food growing. So please make contact with us, come to the next meetings. Thanks to Ellie for doing all the background curating and all that. Brilliant. The final test is that she'll manage to get down all the downloads, and we'll be able to upload it all and save the chat, etc. I was impressed by the discussion in the breakout room, because we had 4 people plus myself. We had one person from a project, Julian from a project in Loughborough, who wanted to make contact with the Midlands cluster, so that's on its way. We had Rachel from Sustain and Capital Growth, who wanted to help extend this discussion into the Good to Grow network and London Food Growers, and work on collaborative projects. And both Georgia and Silvio, from completely different places, academic and northern roots in Oldham, wanted to talk to Maddie more about extending the Greenbelt project. So that's in our little breakout group. So that was really perhaps a summary reflection of the interconnectivity of everything already. Next, we are going to run another ping in January, towards the end of January, because we've got a quite important deadline in the middle of January. And I'm going to just look at Olivia and wave at her, talking about how we use all this information, how we condense all this into a summary report, bearing in mind all the things that have been mentioned, toolkits or not toolkits or whatever, something will come out of this. But the ping number 12, which will be towards the end of January, will be a practical example of practical on the ground stuff, which then influences policy from the grassroots up. And we'll be looking at We Are Avon and Cooperation Hull. So that's it. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening and for being generous with your spirit and everything else. And we hope that's been a useful contribution as we head into the next year. And what we're looking at, I think, is a 5-year project that runs from 25 to 2030 with all of us contributing. So great. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have good days.
Thank you.
Go forth in your brilliant work.
So we're going to stop recording now.